Rita Ramalho. I'm from the World Bank. I manage the Doing Business report, and I'm here for the India Inc. Roundtable.
Great. And so just going back to some of the discussions that you've already had today, if you could tell us a little bit about where India actually currently stands, and also its ambition to be counted amongst the top 50. Would you define that as a very achievable target that it's set for itself?
So India ranks now at 142, but that's actually a number that hides a lot of information to some extent, because there's a huge variation across the different areas that we measure. So in some areas, India already ranks in the top 10, like for instance in areas like protecting minority investors, so the legislation about that area. But in others, India ranks pretty much at the bottom of the classification, in areas such as enforcing contracts, commercial contracts through a court. With regards to the goal of becoming top 50 in the coming years, to some extent this variation can actually help, in the sense that it does show that in some topics India is already has already achieved that goal. So it's working on the ones that they haven't, where they're still far out. Although those areas are normally quite challenging, but if there is an interest and a focus, it is possible. It will take time, it will be difficult, it will be a challenge, but there has been other countries that have been able to, over a period of 5, 6, 7 years, jumped 100 places or more in the ranking. That has happened in the past. So it's rare, but it's not impossible, and it will be a lot of work to make that happen, especially in a country as complex as India, with many different layers of government, being a federal country.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of some, and you did mention that you're yet to monitor some of the changes that have come about, but just from the overall perspective that you have of what movement has happened in the last 1 year since the Modi government took over, what is your general sense, and what is the one thing you would probably like to highlight as a big positive so far that you've seen?
Mm-hmm. We clearly do see changes from last year. So since the new government took place, we see that there's a bigger effort for tackling the doing business issues as a whole, as opposed to before. What we would see is piecemeal reforms here and there, and not very systematic. Now there is clearly an interest from the government to understand what we measure, how we measure, and what are the things that could be done about it. So they're taking a more systematic approach and more comprehensive approach than before. And so that is a big change. If that approach is already being fruitful and changing things on the ground, that is one of the things we're still assessing. So at this point, we cannot yet tell if the government has been successful or not. We're in the midst of actually assessing that for the report that will come out in October, at the end of October. But definitely just that fact, that change of attitude of looking at the indicators of the whole and actually paying attention to this area, that is already a big shift from the past.
And finally, in terms of some of the discussions that you heard today, for instance, this whole idea of states competing against each other and being named and shamed, etc. Do you think that is a competitive sort of federalism aspect that they mentioned would have an impact on a country like India, which is so complex, as you said?
I think having the states compete against each other in these areas has proven quite fruitful in other countries. For instance, Mexico has been doing this type of analysis for many years now. I think they've done 5 rounds of what we call the subnational studies, where they compare the 31 states, or 30 states plus the Mexico City, and that has led to a lot of changes and cities comparing with each other, states comparing with each other. Because the issue that when we, for instance, in the case of Mexico, saying that New York performs better than Mexico City, the Mexicans would say, okay, but that's what we would expect. But if you say that another city in Mexico, like for instance Monterrey, performs better than Mexico City, then there's more of a questioning. We're in the same country. Why are they performing better than we do? So I think it creates a different level of competition than the international one, and it creates more the idea that actually change can be possible if my neighboring state that is in the same country following the same federal rules can do it, why couldn't I also? So in that is actually a big driver of competition and change.
And so would you say, like, from your perspective, you would give that this idea of competitive federalism quite a thumbs up, then, that it could show results soon?
Yeah, I think it can. How far it will show or how fast it will show, it depends a little bit of the interest. But I think of the different states. But actually, we've seen that being quite fruitful in other countries of making a change, of being a good incentive.